The Triple Threat Show is getting a new member. Mehrob, how are you doing today?
Doing phenomenal. I'm happy to be here, man, for the opening show.
We're back, better than ever, and we have a lot to talk about. NBA free agency has opened up. There are questions about what is going to go on with LeBron James and his future. The Knicks finally bring in a new coach. We'll talk about all that and more, but we're going to start off with the New York Knicks in this one. The New York Knicks finally get their new head coach in Mike Brown. Mike Brown, the former head coach of the Sacramento Kings. The Sacramento Kings fired him early on in the season last year. Now the Knicks go out and get him. And my main read of this situation is he was kind of a backup plan. The Knicks clearly wanted to go out and get a guy that had been there and done that before, and you're getting that with Mike Brown. He's been a head coach in 4 different places in his career. He's coached just about every single modern legend, from LeBron James to Steph Curry to Kevin Durant, throughout his career, even dating back to those early Spurs days when he coached guys like Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker and all those guys. So he has plenty of experience dealing with these guys. But is he the right guy in New York? And that is kind of the big question. Tibbs obviously took them over to the Eastern Conference Finals. First time in 25 years that they made it that far in the playoffs. What's your read of this situation? What do you feel about Mike Brown? Because I'm honestly not loving this hire.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Jeremy. Honestly, it's just one of those. Thank God that the Knicks finally hired someone. It took them a month. They fired Tom Thibodeau, going around reaching out to the Houston Rockets for Ime Udoka, reaching out to different franchises to get interviews with their head coaches. Nothing happened. Complete duds. They go to the college scene. They try to get Jay Wright out of retirement. That doesn't work. They go to the assistant head coaching search through the Cavs, the Thunder. That doesn't work. They eventually get around to Mike Brown, well deserved, has a crazy resume with him from the Spurs days when he was with the Greg Popovich's staff, to Steve Kerr, to his days where he brought the Sacramento Kings back to the playoffs, the light, the beam. He started all of that. He spearheaded that group as the head coach. And honestly, I'm shocked that he doesn't have a job right now, but I think it's a good opportunity for him. But in terms of for New York, I think this still boils down to the fact that they fired Tom Thibodeau without a backup plan. They didn't think it just felt like an impulse move. A guy that really developed the culture over there in New York, brought them back to the playoffs, won them a playoff series. 2 years after that, brought them back to the Eastern Conference, which they hadn't been in 25 years. And you fire him. Okay, you fire him. But who? You bring in Mike Brown. I mean, cool. I'm happy that Mike Brown is back in the NBA and he has a job back with a great team in New York, and they have a bunch of great players. I'm just worried about how he's going to be able to survive in that New York market, how he's going to be able to handle that franchise in general, because that is probably one of the arguably the hottest seats in the NBA right now.
Talking about Tom Thibodeau and really just going way back in the timeline of this, you bring up the fact that they fire him. And one of the things that I've seen harped on a lot when we're talking about this New York Knicks head coach search is just the fact that they fired him without a backup plan. You don't fire somebody with a backup plan in mind. Generally, at least from what I see around sports, you're not saying, I'm going to fire this guy so we can specifically hire this guy. A lot of times you go into these situations and you say it's just not working out anymore. And that was kind of what I was getting from the New York Knicks situation. Sure, Tibbs took them to heights that they hadn't seen in my lifetime, in 25 years, in a quarter of a century, right? That is not something to be ungrateful for. That's not something to scoff at. Tibbs finished 4th all time for Knicks wins as a head coach. That's where he is. He had an incredibly successful tenure, but time was up. And that's something that I think needs to be talked about a little bit more when we talk about this search. I like Mike Brown. I think he's a guy that is very different from Tibbs. Tibbs is a my way or the highway kind of coach. He's going to get his system in there, and Mike Brown is going to get his system in there too. That's why you hire him as a head coach, but it's going to be a lot different. He's going to want to work with the players, want to work with the front office, which I think is something that Tibbs really did not want to do, which hurt. The other thing is he's going to get into that rotation. You talk about his successes, that light the beam era with the Kings when he was able to break that 18-year playoff drought, one of the longest playoff droughts in the history of sports, in just modern sports history right there for the Sacramento Kings. He's able to break that drought and bring them out. He's a two-time coach of the year. He has a lot of experience coaching a lot of big egos, and I'm not particularly worried about how he's going to handle the market. I think it's going to be just up to how that team plays. I think this Knicks team honestly solves itself a little bit. I think this is a Knicks team that if you or me were head coach and we just put our guys in there and said these are the best five on the floor, we'll sub in a couple guys to make sure they get their rest, we're going to win. We're going to make the playoffs in the East at least. Now, the playoffs is where it really matters. If this team does not make it back to the Eastern Conference Finals at least, he's probably gone. And this is the year they have to capitalize. They haven't been too aggressive in free agency, which is something that we'll touch on a little bit later in this episode. But bringing in Mike Brown this late, and that's the other side of it, bringing in Mike Brown this late after the draft, after free agency has started, after most of those big pieces are officially off the board, there's a lot of ways that this could go right. There's a lot of ways that this could go wrong. And I don't really think they're setting him up for success there.
Yeah, yeah. You bring up a really big part of this with the Knicks. Arguably, I think you're right. This is their year. If they want to win a championship, if they want to get to the finals, this is the year. You have the Celtics kind of reeling. They don't have Jason Tatum. They're most likely not going to have Jason Tatum this year, at least not to his normal self. And they've blown up house over there. Milwaukee, they're in disarray right now. The Indiana Pacers look like they've gotten worse. The Miami Heat are not around. This is an Eastern Conference that is significantly weaker than what it was before the playoffs started. So if there was a team that really needs to capitalize and that could really take advantage of the moment, the same way that Indiana has this year and last year, it is this New York Knicks team to kind of step out to show themselves as that team.
The other,
I think
go for it.
uh, when we're looking at the starting five, I'm right there with you that their starting five is incredible. Jalen Brunson, Karl-Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, I expect to do better. OG Anunoby is a phenomenal defender. But I think they do need to get some more depth in there. If they can get that depth and with an analytical coach like Mike Brown that'll kind of do some plug in, plug out, see what works instead of just doing my way or highway. I think you're right there with it with Tom Thibodeau. He's a very old school coach versus Mike Brown, more of a new generation. So I like the move. Actually, it could spice up the scene, but the Knicks need to take advantage of this year.
Yeah, they need to take advantage of it. And like I was saying, that taking advantage of it has to take place in the playoffs. And that's the main reason I don't love this move. As good as Mike Brown has been in his career, a career 454 and 304 record, good for a 60% winning percentage, 599 if you're trying to be exact there. But he has not been great in the playoffs. He's taken one team to the finals in his career, was one of those LeBron Cavs teams when LeBron was in his heyday with the Cavs. But he also hasn't won a playoff series since 2012. That's 13 years ago since a Mike Brown coach team has won a playoff series. And if that's what the ceiling is for this Knicks team, it's a bad look. Again, they wanted that established coach. They went out and they got that established coach. You talked about who they were trying to get, trying to poach coaches from other teams in the league, trying to get guys like a Mike Budenholzer was in there, like a Mike Malone was in there. These guys that had coached and were fired very recently from these teams already had experience, and a lot of that is because they don't want that coach to be unprepared for the playoffs, I feel. But getting a guy like Mike Brown, who I think is a solid coach, right? He was known as a defensive guy coming up, but what he was able to change that team into offensively for the Kings most recently, it was very, very impressive, and it really showed that he could play both sides of the ball. But that, again, the playoff record really concerns me. And unless he can turn it around with this team, a team that has made it past the first round now 2 years in a row, it's just not going to look good. He could be a one and done coach if he loses in the first round, especially.
Yeah, and there's a reason why I said that it's the hottest seat in basketball right now. It literally is the hottest seat in basketball because you don't have the Celtics, like I said, you don't have the Celtics. You have a couple young teams in the Pistons, the Magic that haven't even seen the spotlight before. The Pacers are reeling, the Bucks are reeling. That this is the Knicks moment. This is their time. If they want to make a change, it is them or the Cavs. Really, if we're gonna look at the Eastern Conference, it is them or the Cavs at the top of the leaderboard for them in the Eastern Conference right now. That might be a little bit of a hot take, but that's if you look at it on paper, that's what it looks like right now.
I mean, those two are on the top, but I'd be hard pressed not to include a team like the Magic in there, who I'm a big fan of, making that trade for Desmond Bane. The Hawks, sneaky contenders in the East, what they've done this postseason, this offseason, maybe they could make some moves over there. There are definitely a couple of teams that I think could be dangerous. Now, they're a little bit more in the backside of things, and it's probably going to be one of those two teams, but still, there's other options out there, and I wouldn't sit there all high and mighty if you're the Knicks, because out of those four that we brought up, the Knicks have done the least to improve and might be in the worst situation, if I'm being completely honest. But Mike Brown, it's going to be a tough year for him. He needs to prove that he can win in the playoffs. I like him as a coach. I just don't know how he's going to fare, especially not really getting to choose the roster, just being stuck with what they had more than anything, which probably is a reason why a lot of these teams, a lot of these coaches didn't want to be hired by the Knicks. They didn't have that sense of control that they would have had for building their own roster anywhere else. But if anybody can do it, I think Mike Brown has the ability to turn it around. Like I said, 60% winning. We won 60% of his games over the course of his career in the regular season. He's a guy that I do trust to be a successful head coach at a bare minimum for the New York Knicks. But outside of that, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, LeBron James. LeBron James has opted into his contract, one of the big moves of free agency so far. He usually opts out. Now, there were some ominous statements from his agent, Rich Paul, threatening the Lakers with a potential trade. We'll talk about if that's going to happen. Some moves have been made from the Lakers to try to avoid that. But is it enough? That's coming up next here on the Triple Threat Show. Welcome back to the Triple Threat Show. We are your hosts, Jeremy Lapidus and Mehrob Fatemi over there. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the newest head coach for the New York Knicks, Mike Brown, formerly of the Sacramento Kings, now the next head coach for the New York Knicks. But a big story out of the NBA now is what's going on with LeBron James. LeBron James, of course, the GOAT. Potentially, regardless. LeBron James, a member of the Lakers, age 40 right now, has opted into the final year of his contract. Will be making $52.6 million this year, the 14th highest paid player in the NBA. But he has shown a little bit of unhappiness with the Lakers franchise. He said, "You either make the Lakers a championship team or you trade me," in more words, in a statement through his agent, Rich Paul. How real is this, I guess, is the starting point, because we've seen threats like this from LeBron James a lot over his career, especially as he gets older. How real is a potential trade from the Lakers for LeBron James at this age?
I mean, this is something that the LeBron, like you said, has been teasing for years. If you think back, 2 years ago when we heard about the Steph Curry, LeBron James rumblings, when LeBron literally came out on his podcast and said, I want to play with LeBron. And then 3 months later, there were rumblings that there were legit rumors between the Warriors and Lakers on a possible trade to pair the two up. This is something that has pretty much every trade deadline. LeBron says, make the team better, tries to push the Lakers to make the team better. It could be one of those once again. And this is a team that still Bronny James is a part of. But at the same time, this is a LeBron James that is trying to solidify himself as the GOAT. And honestly, if you add one more title to the resume that he already has, it's pretty much, I wouldn't say it's undeniable, but it's hard. Makes a much harder debate to be had. At least makes him in terms of longevity, it would solidify that at him as in terms of longevity, having the longest, being the best for the longest period of time. Having said all of that, I don't know if this is a real thing that's gonna happen, because I know Rob Pelinka, and he's been pretty hard stoned on getting LeBron help. He brought Luka to LA last year at the trade deadline in a shocking move, traded Anthony Davis for Luka out of nowhere. That was to help LeBron at the end of the day. It really was there to help LeBron. It's just going to be about if LeBron's happy enough. It's going to be up to his criteria, in my opinion. If he thinks it's good enough, if he thinks the team is good enough, he'll stay. But if he thinks the team is slipping up, we'll see how it goes. And they did make a big move today, so we'll see if that will be the spark of all of it.
Yeah, you bring up that move, and we'll get to that in a second. But I do want to say, I think this one is a little bit different than in the past. We usually see at this point LeBron James opt out of a contract and say, make the team better, and I'll come back, basically. But he's opted in. He's saying, you either trade me or you either make this team better or you trade me. And this again feels, again, at the age he's at, he's got what, 2 years left before he's done in the NBA. This is the final year of his contract, which I think is another big part of that. There are a couple teams that I think make sense for him. This feels like the realest of those potential trade demands when it comes to LeBron. Those teams that are out there, we take a look at them. The Mavericks, a really interesting one, right? The Mavericks are one that I've seen a lot of connections in a potential LeBron trade to. He's played with a lot of these guys. Kyrie Irving won a championship with him, won a championship in the bubble with Anthony Davis, gets to pair up with a rookie in Cooper Flag. The Mavericks have the money to match that $50 million in salary and still have a very good team. Now, are the Lakers going to go back to are the Mavericks really going to go back to the table with the Lakers after the reaction from the trade with Luka? I don't know. But that's one of those teams that I think makes a lot of sense there. There's two other teams that I think make good sense for him, though. You talked about Steph Curry, the Warriors. He said he always wanted to play with Curry. We saw him play together in the Olympics. That was really good. The timeline fits, and you could make the money work in a 1-for-1 Jimmy Butler for LeBron James trade. That's something that if they wanted to do would work. Now, do I think the Lakers would accept that trade? Probably not, But you have to think about LeBron James, 1 year left. Jimmy Butler has at least 3 or 4 years left before he's done. It's a different level, and you have to think about the long term, especially for a Lakers teams that's trying to build towards the future. The Warriors could be an interesting spot, and the last one we just talked about them, the Knicks. The Knicks are an interesting spot. You could move a guy like Cat, who really hurts the defense for them. LeBron has talked again about playing in Madison Square Garden, playing for the Knicks. We've heard him have those conversations in the past. They just hire a new coach. They have yet to make that big splash after losing in the Eastern Conference Finals. We've seen a lot of their rivals in the East make some big splashes in the meantime. The Knicks are the big team in the East that I would look at, but there's also some, dark horses, I would say. The Cavs, the Nuggets, the Timberwolves out there that could go and make a move. All of those teams are trying to ramp up. The Nuggets already made their big trade, so I really kind of take them out of this list at this point. The Timberwolves want a star for Ant, right? They were in on that KD sweepstakes. Why not try and go get a guy like Braun to pair up with Ant? I think that would be an even better pair than Ant and KD. And then the Cavs, just a return home, right? You want to go, LeBron wants to go home. Why not? They've got money that they can move off of if they want to get a little bit cheaper, although that one also just doesn't fit too well as terms of personnel. But is there anywhere that if this was going to be a real thing, where LeBron James would get traded, where would that be? Where are you pointing at? I think the Knicks, Warriors, and Mavs are probably the three that make the most sense to me.
Honestly, yeah, the Knicks, Warriors, probably in the order Mavs, Warriors, Knicks, I'd say are my top three destinations for him. He's like you said, he's mentioned playing for New York. The teammates connections that he has in Dallas, and of course the Steph Curry connection that he has in Golden State. A fun fact that I actually just kind of stumbled upon yesterday when I was looking at this. Do you know that Steph Curry and LeBron James were born in the same hospital in Akron, Ohio?
I did not.
Fun fact. Fun fact. So, I mean, they have connections. So all three of these teams have connections. And honestly, if you're the Lakers, you probably don't want to trade him to somewhere in the Western Conference just in case you see him again in the playoffs. So that tends to happen with big name players. So that's why I would put New York on the list. Another team I kind of want to put on the list, but I'm hesitant to just because I don't think they have the money to match LeBron's contract, are the Miami Heat. If he went to pair back up with Eric Spoelstra, if he went back with Bam Adebayo, they don't have the talent, and I know he's looking to play for a championship level team. But I would not be shocked if we saw him go back to Miami to pair up with Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra again.
Yeah, so the Heat are a really interesting one that you bring up there, because my first criteria before I even started looking at money or fit was just, is this a championship level team if you add LeBron to it? And I'm not certain the Heat are. I think that's priority one for LeBron. He had his time in Miami. He won a chip in Miami. He's going to get his jersey retired in Miami, potentially. I don't know how hot of a take that is. I think he gets his jersey retired in all three places that he's played right now. But there are that I just don't see it being a team that he would give the okay to trade to, and I don't think the Lakers are going to move off of LeBron unless he says, "I want you to trade me immediately." And I don't think they'd trade him to any random team. That wouldn't end well for the Lakers, especially with the way that the front office has kind of been painted this offseason already, surrounding everything going on with Dorian Finney-Smith and the attempted re-signing of Luka. But again, they have the option right now, the Lakers do, to get this team to LeBron's standards. And that's what they're trying to do. I know Rich Paul said in that statement that he understands the team is trying to build for the future with Luka Doncic, but they need to also be a championship team now with LeBron James. And the big move they've made today, picking up DeAndre Ayton. They needed a center. They needed a center so badly. They're getting one practically for free, as Portland is paying him $25 million not to play basketball for them right now. It's not enough in my mind, if I'm being completely honest, just bringing in DeAndre Ayton. They don't really have the shooters on the outside or the defense, especially after losing a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith to free agency. That hurts that team a lot. They needed a center, and they went out and got one, but that is bare minimum. We're bringing in DeAndre Ayton maybe makes them a second-round team. It doesn't make them a championship team in the West. They need to do more. and they've just kind of sat on their hands this free agency, and it's been really frustrating, especially when you have such a big threat of LeBron leaving in right behind you in the mirror. I just don't love what the Lakers have been doing this offseason. I don't think it's enough.
I'm right there with you, honestly. It's shocking. The Lakers, you see what the Rockets are doing, like they have a sense of urgency. That's the urgency that we need to see from the Lakers. And dare I say, it's either they're just sitting there waiting to find something to fall in their lap, or they're just waiting to make a big move. I don't know. That's something that we're probably going to have to revisit at some point with a couple big name players on the market, and that could be coming up on the market soon. Milwaukee. But there are a lot of teams out there, right? That the Lakers definitely need to make some moves. That I'm really happy that they picked up DeAndre Ayton. They needed him. Al Horford is a guy that's still on their radar. That's a top target for them to pick up, which would add to that size, make another power forward. But all around, I just don't like what the Lakers have done. They need to add defense. They need to add perimeter players. They need to add shooters. There's a lot of issues with this Lakers team. And yeah, I'm happy that Luka has his lob threat back. And we're not just looking at Jackson Hayes and giving him the starting spot anymore. But we need more than that. They need more than that in LA for sure.
Yeah, you brought up the Bucks, and let's just get right into that there, because that is a whole nother can of worms right now. The Bucks have been in the news for a while, and really this leads kind of into it. Are the Lakers a real spot for Giannis, especially after the whole situation with Damian Lillard and what's going on with him? If you haven't heard about this, it was probably the biggest story in sports yesterday, as Damian Lillard was cut from the Bucks. The Bucks brought in Miles Turner, who had been a Pacer lifer for what it had seemed for a very, very long time. He was a big part of what had led them to the finals this year, and he seemed like he really loved playing for Indiana. But now he goes to what's probably Indiana's biggest rival, because Indiana did not want to spend past the second apron, especially with Halliburton going down. Now he joins the Bucks. The Bucks, to make that money work, they pay him $107 million a year, have moved off of Damian Lillard. They're going to stretch out his contract. He is going to be paid his $113 million over the next 5 seasons. He's not going to play basketball for them. And this is kind of a first of its kind contract. We see it a lot in baseball. You hear about the deferred money with guys like Shohei Ohtani, with guys like Bobby Bonilla. Bobby Bonilla Day was yesterday. We celebrated that, of course, like we do every single July 1st. But things like this can be trendsetters. We've seen the Saints do stuff like this, and you see where it leads them to right now, where they are just in absolutely the worst possible situation with the cap spot they're in. Is this, first of all, what did you think of the Bucks cutting Dame? Are the Lakers a real spot for Giannis? And what do you think is going to be the long-term effects of this? Is this going to be a something that we start to see more and more teams do with bad contracts?
I just I'll start with the contracts. I think this is something that we'll start to see more. Only team, and I only know this because I followed the Celtics, and like I'm born and bred from Boston, so I knew how they handled Kevin Durant, or not Kevin Durant, Garnett at the tail end of his career before we traded him to Brooklyn. They stretched out that contract in a similar way that they're doing to Damian Lillard right now. They stretch it over 4 years and paid him off that way. That is not normal. That is 13 years ago when we saw that. That I can, in my recollection, I can even remember anything like this happening. In terms of Indiana with Miles Turner, it's Pacers spokespeople, the Miles Turner spokespeople say that the Pacers came on the table and they didn't offer him enough money, and the Bucks offered him more. The Pacers offered him $22 million a year. He settled for 26 in Milwaukee. So I don't know what's going on with that connection, but it sounds like it's very black and white instead of everything sounding like everything making sense. It just doesn't make sense. In terms of what to expect with Giannis, can you imagine a team with Luka and Giannis on the same team in LA? I don't think that the Lakers have the assets to do so, but Do they try to use LeBron as a trade piece? Possibly. Do they try to I don't know what they can do with. I don't know how they're going to be able to figure that out. I don't think they can, but it's on the table at this point. This is a guy in Giannis that really has said time and time again, similar to LeBron, but 12 years younger, that he wants to win championships. He wants to be competitive. This is a guy that's been denied, hasn't made it past the first round in 3 years. Won a championship 4 years ago and hasn't smelled a conference final since. The farthest he's been was the second round against the Celtics the year after. It really hasn't been clear sailing in Milwaukee. And now they cut Damian Lillard, something that kind of it just completely looks like it undercut Giannis, took him by complete surprise. It just makes no sense. It makes no sense what Milwaukee's doing, giving up, looking like they're trying to not saying it deliberately that they're trying to kick out their star player, but trying to slowly push him out the door, it seems, in a way. I'm not sure if that's what the case is, but it has that feel to it at the moment.
Yeah, no, I mean, this was a shocker. Like in free agency, you're expecting these guys to get signed, but Dame going down, and as much as it sucks that Dame isn't going to be able to play next season due to that Achilles injury, he's not done. He's not going to be the same Damian Lillard that we've seen in the past when he was with Portland, especially coming off of that Achilles. We know he's not going to be the same, but he's still going to be a lethal shooter from deep, a guy that literally you throw him a as a spark plug guy off your bench, he's going to be an incredible second unit leader. You don't want to be paying that guy $113 million over the next 4 years. I understand. I do understand that. But there are so many teams that are going to want Damian Lillard to come in and play the kind of role that I guess Chris Paul has been playing in recent years. What he did with the Spurs and what Russell Westbrook has been doing over these last couple years. That's the kind of archetype, that's the kind of role that I expect Dame to play. And there's going to be plenty of suitors for him. I don't know if they pick him up this season because obviously he's not going to play this season. But in free agency next year, when everybody's going to have money again, it's going to be really interesting to see where he does end up. But this also took Giannis by surprise. That's the secondary part of this, right? You bring in Miles Turner to say, hey, Giannis, we're going to continue to try and win basketball games. You should stay with us, and we're going to win basketball games. We're going to be a competitive team. And the Bucks have been busy in free agency. I haven't necessarily loved all the moves that they've made, but they've been busy. They've been trying to show that they're out there, trying to win games, trying to keep this team competitive, but you can't blindside your star like that. And if I'm being honest, I don't believe that they blindsided him with this move, but I also believe that he was not happy with it. I'm sure they told him, and they were like, this is the only way that we can stay competitive. We need to clear up some money. Damian Lillard is no longer going to be a member of the team. They made that decision, and they told him. Now, I don't agree because Giannis is going to ask for a trade now. I really do think that, and we were talking last night. I think because of this move, Giannis gets moved by mid-July before NFL training camp comes back around the 18th of July. I think that's kind of the date that we're talking about with him. I would keep an eye out because, like Sham says, it's been an absolute insane summer in the world of basketball, but this is probably going to be the biggest move. We saw Kevin Durant get traded. We've seen a lot of these massive moves, but Giannis out there, there's still a lot of teams that are saving their assets for him because he is going to be on the trade block, and I think this is the final nail in the coffin for Milwaukee.
Yeah, it really feels like that. And like I said, it feels like they're not trying to kick him out the door, but the ways that they're making trades, the way that they're just not, I'm not saying that you have to follow your star players, whatever they want to do, but at least make the team better and at least make him content, at least come to some sort of agreement, especially when the guy has said time and time again, I want this team to get better or I'm leaving. He's already said it before that he wants the team to get better or he's going to leave. He doesn't want to leave, but he will leave. This looks like this is the beginning of the end in Milwaukee for Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah. And we'll have to see exactly where he goes. That'll be a topic for a little bit later. But we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, NBA free agency has been absolutely wild. We've talked about Damian Lillard. We talked about Miles Turner. We'll take a look at some of the winners and the losers here, some of these teams and the big moves that have taken place so far, next on the Triple Threat Show. Welcome back to the Triple Threat Show. We are your hosts, Jeremy Lapidus and Mehrob Fatemi here. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over some of the biggest pieces of news from NBA free agency. LeBron James opting in and potentially asking for a trade out of the LA Lakers, and Damian Lillard being cut in favor of Miles Turner with the Milwaukee Bucks. In this segment, we continue our talk about NBA free agency, talking all about what's going on, the winners and the losers from the early days of free agency. We'll start off here with the winner side of things. We'll go with just one at a time, and my favorite team so far, just everything they've done in the offseason in total. How about the Houston Rockets? You touched on it a little bit when we talked about what they had done when we were talking about LeBron James, but bringing in Kevin Durant, you get that scoring option, right? Then you'd bring in Dorian Finney-Smith, who's in one of the best 3-and-D players that was out there. They needed a three-point shooter badly. It also helps that you still have a great defense. One of the best defenses in all of the NBA last season continues to build on what made them the 2 seed while also improving their greatest weakness. I love what they have done. I absolutely think they've been, if not one, the second best team in free agency so far.
No doubt. The Houston Rockets are my winners so far of free agency as well. You re-sign Ime Udoka to a long-term contract. You bring in a Kevin Durant to spearhead that offense. You keep Alperen Sengun. You keep Amen Thompson. You keep Fred VanVleet. All these players that have really helped you get to the point that you're at right now. You had to give up Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green, unfortunately, but to give up those two players and bring in a Kevin Durant, that's a winning move for them. If I'm being honest, you would bring in a top 10 pick with the number 9 overall pick. This is a team that's going to be not only young for a while. They bring in Kevin Durant to teach some of the younger or be a mentor for some of the younger guys to kind of take some of the pressure off of the role players to give them room to grow. You give Ime Udoka a number 1 scoring threat, and you solidify him to stay around for a long time. This is a Houston Rockets team that has pretty much cemented themselves as a team that's going to be around for the next few years. And I wouldn't be shocked if we see Houston become a legitimate threat in the Western Conference in the next, at least this year and the next coming years to come, as legit contenders to come out of the Western Conference.
Yeah, with how much parity has been in the NBA, you talk about what this Rockets team have done. They're very Thunder-esque in the way that they build a really great defense. Now you have that scoring threat. Now Kevin Durant is a little bit older than Shea in that scoring threat, so that's going to kind of shorten their window, their timeline a little bit. But it's not just the fact that they brought in these guys, it's the fact that they kept around the coach in Ime Udoka, like you talked about. The fact that they extended just about everybody on that bench to keep this team together for at least the next 2 or 3 seasons. They were the 2 seed last year, only to the eventual NBA champions, the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think they're the second best team in the league this year, behind the Thunder, really putting up a fight. And I think it's a lot closer than some people are willing to give them credit for. I think they're ready to be contenders this year.
I really think so, man. I really think so. This is a Rockets team that was third in the Western Conference this year. This was a Rockets team that went from 40 wins or 38 wins to 55 wins in 1 year. And I know the Pistons went crazier, but this is a team that looks like they went from 38 to 55, pushed the Warriors to a game 7 with Steph Curry on the team, and a team that looks like they're ready to they're going to be a dark horse team, similar to like you said, the Oklahoma City Thunder. In my opinion, similar to the Indiana Pacers in a little bit in the way that they're built. I'm a little bit worried about Kevin Durant, but this is a guy in Kevin Durant that can score 27 points a night whenever he wants. This is a guy in Kevin Durant that wants the ball in his hands to spearhead an offense. It looks good on paper, and honestly, I really like the Houston Rockets. I'm a fan of even Ime Udoka. He's from Boston. He's the guy that brought the Boston Celtics to the championship 2022. All around, I think he's a great coach, and I think this is a team that's going to be around for years to come.
Yeah, and it's not just the Rockets that have had a really good free agency or at least off season. I think the Nuggets are another team that have absolutely killed it. You talk about upgrading. They move off of Michael Porter Jr. and a 2032 first round pick for Cam Johnson. Cam Johnson, who, when he is hot, the bucket is a million feet wide. He just does not miss. He is more consistent than Michael Porter Jr. He plays a very similar role to Michael Porter Jr. You bring back Bruce Brown, who was a very effective player for you in years past when he was with Jokic. This is going to be a really good Nuggets team. I love what they've done building around Jokic after they didn't really have the depth without those Jokic minutes. Cam Johnson can carry that offense on his own. We saw him do it in spurts with the Nets last season. He's a guy that could, like you were saying with KD, drop 40 on you in any given night. He is that kind of special offensive talent. Now, you might lose a little bit defensively, but it's not like Michael Porter Jr. was giving you too much defensively anyway. I like this move a lot for the Nuggets. That is they're one of my biggest winners as well, right up there with the Rockets.
Yeah. And like you said, I'm going to harp right on Cam Johnson. The way that he's pretty much like Michael Porter Jr., but can play defense as well. Can shoot the ball better, can rebound, can is a great facilitator, and he can play defense. All around, it looks like this is a Denver Nuggets team that's going to be better next year. And honestly, with Nikola Jokic, they're going to need to be better with how they've been performing in the post. And they're like these other teams that comes down to the postseason play. And Cam Johnson could be one of those guys.
No, absolutely. And like I said, that is one of the biggest moves that I have seen in free agency, a big trade over there for them. I'm shocked for the return for the Nets. I thought they might have gotten more if they traded him at the deadline, but still, the 2032 first round pick could be just about anything. You don't know. It could be the first pick, could be the 30th pick. Who knows? It could be the 32nd pick at that point in the NBA if expansion happens. But it's it's a wild card, and I love this. I love it for the Nuggets. You need to be able to be an effective team when Jokic isn't on the court. Getting a guy like Cam Johnson is absolutely going to help with that. The third team that I thought were winners, kind of touched on it a little bit, the Atlanta Hawks. I love what the Hawks have done. They bring in Kristaps Porzingis in a trade. Contract year Kristaps is a different animal, right? When he has money on the line, he finds a way to stay healthy. And that's really all you need for Kristaps Porzingis to be that kind of player. You put him next to Trae Young, who's one of the best passers in all of the NBA, not to mention what he can do spacing the floor, but also going out and getting some wings, getting guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Luke Kennard to spread the floor and add defense especially. I am in love with what this Hawks team has done. They're a team that, like I was talking about, could be one of those teams in the East that makes a big jump, and they haven't really even put too much towards that, right? Trae Young has taken this team to the Eastern Conference Finals before with arguably a worse team than what it is on paper right now. I think they're a team that's dangerous in the East, and they're another team that I think killed it so far this offseason.
No doubt. You bring up Luke Kennard, you bring up Nickeil Alexander Walker, two guys that Shams reported that Trae Young recruited himself to bring in. And that day they signed with the Atlanta Hawks. This is not by coincidence. This is Trae Young. This is a guy that a lot of teams he's a very underrated star in a way these days because he's on a worse team. We don't see him in the playoffs as much as we used to. Um, this is an Atlanta Hawks team that's going to be back in the playoffs. And the one concern I do have is the Kristaps Porzingis illness because there hasn't been a peep about it since the Celtics were eliminated from the playoffs. That is a little concern that I do have for the Atlanta Hawks. They give up Clint Capella to get him, but I expect him to be okay. And like you said, this is contract year Kristaps. He'll be back. If he can be back, if he's healthy, he will be out there and play at a very high level.
And that's really all it is. If you're trading for Kristaps, all you need him to be is healthy. Because he is undoubtedly a star in this league when he's out there. It's just one of those situations where you can never count on him to be out there, to be healthy in those big moments. You've just got to hope and pray that Kristaps is going to have a good health season. I've got one more winner for you, Mehrob. And this one is a little bit out there. How about the Charlotte Hornets? The Charlotte Hornets have been a little bit busy this offseason, right? They kept a lot of those guys around, bringing back Trey Mann. I like the draft that they had a lot, bringing in Con Knippel, Ryan Kalkbrenner, and Liam McNeely. This is a team that's going out and getting a lot of guys that can just be solid. And if the Hornets can just be solid, that is a massive step up for them. I sneaky like what the Hornets have done. Now, it's not on the level of the other three teams that we talked about, where they're going to be in the conversation to win their conferences and such. But I do really like what the Hornets have done so far this offseason. I kind of put them up there with the groups that we've talked about so far.
I won't lie, Jeremy. I'm so happy you said that because I was going to say it if you didn't. I am so happy that with what the Charlotte Hornets have done. And in a way, if you think back to I won't say it's on the same level, but if you think back to what the Detroit Pistons did a couple years ago when they drafted Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, how those guys have turned out. I see shades of that a little bit with this Charlotte Hornets team. They've built very well around LaMelo Ball. I am a little bit upset that they're not going to keep Miles Bridges because I think that's a big part of that team. But they bring in Trey Mann. They've been really busy. They bring in Pat Connaughton from Milwaukee. This is a team that have really built themselves very well for the future. And who knows if they have a decent year, they could be eye candy. So for one of these stars, up and coming stars, and they could be in the market for one of these guys. This is a team that I see a lot of potential for in the coming years
Yeah,
for sure.
they kind of fleece the Jazz over there, getting a guy in Colin Sexton who still has a really high ceiling as well. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. Those are my four winners. I'm sure you've got more, Mehrob. Who else did we miss? Who's a big winner for you?
I personally really like what the Jazz have done as well. Keeping Larry Markkinen. I am a little bit worried about Ace Bailey just because of his off the court, how he's been handling his draft situation at the moment. But him on the court, he is such an unbelievable talent on the court. So I expect him to be okay. But this is a Utah Jazz team that has really started to rework that market. They had a really good draft, and I think all around, this is a team that's going to be around them. And of course, I have to mention the Dallas Mavericks with how they've really revamped themselves in the offseason. They've done a phenomenal job. Cooper Flag's going to be the next big name star in the NBA. I have no doubt, barring an injury, God forbid an injury. But I think that Dallas Mavericks team is going to be around for a while. And it's making Nico Harrison look a little bit like a magician right now, getting that number one overall pick with that team.
I do have a question for you about the Mavs. How high do you think? I mean, you don't have to give me an exact number, but Cooper Flag, right? Cooper Flag is going to be a top what player in the NBA consistently. You could have seasons where he could be top whatever. He could have seasons where he had a bad season. He's going to be a top whatever player on average. Where do you think he's going to be? Is he's going to be a top 30, top 20, top 50 player in the NBA? Where do you think he's going to sit?
I could see him sitting around top 15, top 20. The guy, I don't say they play similar styles, but I can see him making a splash in the NBA the same way that John Morant did in his first few years. A skywalker, an athletic freak that can shoot it, is a defenseman. He's tall. He's an all-around great player. And at a point guard position, the way he is, well, they play him as a shooting guard because they have Kyrie Irving as the point guard. But all around, this is a team that's going to be really good for a while. And I could see him being in the top 15, if not possibly the top 10. But I'm not going to go that far yet. We'll see how he does on the court.
Yeah, because I feel very similar, where he's going to be a top 20 player, but the way people are talking about him, I feel like he's a little bit overhyped. Like, I like what he brings as a passer. I like what he brings as a shooter. I like what he brings as a finisher. Where my questions come up with him, and he's an all around complete player. He's great defensively, great offensively, but I don't love him as a ball handler. And he's not necessarily going to be a ball handler anyway in the league, but I feel like people are expecting him to play a kind of Ben Simmons style role where he's going to be the guy bringing the ball up. He's going to have the ball in his hands a lot and be dribbling. That's not what he's going to play. And I think people are going to be a little disappointed by that, where he's going to be more of an off ball kind of player, despite his creation ability. I still think he's going to be great. Don't get me wrong. Top 20 player is nothing to scoff at. But I just don't know about how much he is being hyped up right now when you're comparing it to a lot of the other guys around the league. I think we might be getting a little carried away. That happens when you're going number one overall in the draft, of course, but I think we kind of need to temper our expectations a little bit when it comes to especially Cooper Flag and maybe even this Mavs team, because Kyrie is dealing with injury, because AD's coming off of an injury. There's just a lot of question marks with that team that I'm still not ready to declare them as a huge winner yet. But they did do a lot of good. I can
The
see your
last thing,
point.
yeah, the last thing I want to say is about that ball handling. When you have a freshman guard, point guard that goes in the top 10 to the Charlotte Hornets, that he was the ball handler for that Duke team. That is why he played. He was the facilitator to Cooper Flag. Cooper Flag facilitated late in the game, and the one little bit of issue concern I have is for him in the clutch because he did kind of shrink a little bit in that national championship in the final four rounds. But I expect him to show out big when he needs to be. I expect him to grow from that. But as for ball handler, I'm right there with you. When you have Con Knipple going in the top 10, he wasn't the primary ball handler in Duke. No way.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not all roses in the NBA. There's a couple losers over there that we have to get into. And I don't have too many. I mean, I think a lot of the losers that have happened so far are just because of, a lack of doing anything. You talk about the Lakers. We talked about them already. I think they're in the loser side of things. Only bringing in DeAndre Ayton, potentially losing out on LeBron James, losing out on Dorian Finney-Smith hurts a lot, not just for the fact that you lose a great 3-and-D player, but the fact that Luka really liked him. And when you're trying to make Luka sign a long-term extension with you, bad talking a guy, or allegedly bad talking a guy that your future superstar really likes, is not a good look for Pelinka and the Lakers there. I have him on the loser side, and very similarly, the Warriors. They haven't done anything. The Warriors have just kind of sat there, and they haven't done much. I feel like they really need to take a swing to make the last couple years of Curry mean something. Those are my two big losers. They've just kind of been sitting there.
Yeah. The Warriors have been shopping Jonathan Kuminga. Have been thinking about bringing Al Horford. Warriors and the Lakers seem like the two top targets for him. Outside of those two teams, I think we touched on the Bucks pretty well. They've been a big loser for me. The Knicks haven't really done anything as well. I haven't seen them add any depth for an offseason where it looks like depth is being passed around. Dorian Finney-Smith, Luke Kennard, Nikhil Alexander-Walker. These are all guys that the Knicks could absolutely love coming off the bench and adding to that rotation. Outside of that, I mean, I don't really have very many other losers. I think those are the other two. The only slight winner, we'll have to see how it all transpires. I don't know. I'm kind of neutral about them for now. Are the Boston Celtics. And I don't want to harp on them because they're my home team, but they do
Harp
get
on.
guys off. They're a team that has a guy in Damian Lillard in their sights right now. They do miss out on the DeAndre Ayton sweepstakes, but if they can solidify that Damian Lillard contract, I think I would put them in the winners contract in the winners room as well. Getting two guys off the books and then bringing Damian Lillard on a minimum veteran contract.
One team that I think is interesting, and I see your point about the Celtics, is the Pistons, right? The big thing with the Pistons is, of course, the scandal with Malik Beasley. Malik Beasley was the three-point leader last season, made the most three-pointers in the entire NBA, set a franchise record for the Pistons, the most three-pointers in a season made, and he was in contract negotiations, pretty set to get a 3-year, $42 million deal before the whole gambling allegations came up. And it's not even gambling allegations. It is, and I quote, a federal investigation for activity related to unusual betting patterns. This is the same thing that Terry Rozier was under investigation for. They found no wrongdoing over there when talking about Terry Rozier, but this is not necessarily saying he gambled. It's saying there's a lot of weird movement around his potential play, his player props in general, and that really has thrown the Pistons situation completely into out of whack, right? They were expecting to just build off of what was a really successful season. Now they need to go out and they've made some moves that I haven't necessarily loved. They've been okay, but they've been kind of rushed for the Pistons, and I don't know if Malik Beasley's coming back. Of course, all of this is still under investigation, so we're not going to speak to one side or the other on this, but I will say, with this situation, I think we're going to see a lot more of this coming up, especially when we get to 5 years from now, right? I went to college, I was growing up, everything started to get legalized in these states. I know a lot of people that are absolutely hooked on gambling, athletes in sports gambling, absolutely hooked on that kind of thing. And that is a big no no that is something that is going to be a big, big issue. They need to start to sever ties. Otherwise, it's going to be a whole big thing. Got a little bit off topic here, but speaking a little bit on Malik Beasley here, Mehrob, what is next for him? Do you think he's going to have another chance here after these allegations? And what is the real fallout? What is a lesson the NBA can learn? They had something with Jonte Porter, of course, who got kicked out of the league forever. Uh, this is something we're going to start to see more of, not just in the NBA, but in every single sport. How do they deal with this? What's the solution moving forward?
It's just so hard because part of me wants to say that there was a reason why that betting was illegal for the longest time, and then popularity grew, and then um, there were underground betting betting going on that people did not know about. There was just underground, just kind of cash based. Big companies want to get involved. NBA, these leagues get sponsorships, money gets thrown around, and all of a sudden it starts getting legalized. And then see, like you said, Jonte Porter, you see athletes getting involved in it. There's a bunch of um, examples in the NFL of this happening as well. Now you have your latest example in Malik Beasley. I think it's all going to depend on how this situation goes down. It depends on the severity of it. If he gets, if it's, if he's guilty of these allegations, I don't like Malik Beasley's case. I know he's a phenomenal player. He's a great player, and any team would love to have him because of how useful he is. But when you have allegations like that, you can't. You can't.
Can't touch it.
You, you can't touch it. Exactly. So I think it's just going to depend on how these allegations go down, and this is gonna be an ongoing topic for sure, no doubt.
It's just something to keep an eye out. Free agency is going to keep rolling on as we go further into this offseason. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Triple Threat Show. We have been your hosts, Jeremy Lapidus and Mehrob Fatemi over there. We will be back later on this week. Have a happy July 4th if you are celebrating in the U.S. We will see you next time on the Triple Threat Show. Bye-bye.